Greetings, friends. Welcome back here on the YouTube channel Nerd Alchemist. You can also watch this on Facebook and on Instagram on the Film Alchemist podcast page. You can also find us on Twitter at Film Alchemist 1. We're on all the social medias, and we want to connect with you guys there. You may email the show, the Film Alchemist podcast, at gmail.com or filmalchemistpod at gmail.com to be exact. Especially if you have more tidbits for filmography face-offs that you'd like to see. We have a big one tonight and a couple more big ones we're working on. You can also find the audio description of our podcast, the Film Alchemist Pod, down there in the description. Be sure to go there, subscribe, rate, and review for all the fun stuff coming up. Alex, yes. Tonight in our first ever filmography face-off, I will be your host, Josh Griffey, joined as always by
Alex Dandino.
Just get the intros out. So here we go. Enough business. Down to some hardcore fighting. We're going to fight. We're going to fight around the world. So we had this idea. My friend Kevin Weinman actually is to credit with this. We were at a bar and we got in a really vehement argument about who had the better film career, Harrison Ford or Tom Hanks. I stamped my flag firmly on Harrison Ford Island, and he said Tom Hanks. And we had a good a row about it. And it's good-spirited because we both love Tom Hanks and we both love Harrison Ford, but it's fun, right? So we thought tonight, as we are coming up on October, where we do a horror movie marathon extravaganza, where we do a horror movie every day in October, we just did John Carpenter month. So we are pretty well-versed in both John Carpenter and Wes Craven right now.
All true.
Probably two of my favorite horror movie directors. Definitely on the Mount Rushmore for me.
Yes.
This is a tough one. If you were to choose, right? So this is a filmography face-off. You must end the show by firmly saying, resolutely, I would take one man's filmography over another's, right? So let's start the show with this, Alex. Let's lay out our top 5 movies from each director. Would you care to start?
Sure. My top 5 Wes Craven movies.
Okay.
Are Nightmare on Elm Street.
All-time classic.
Vampire in Brooklyn, which I'm not sure many people realize he directed.
Really? Okay. I like Vampire in Brooklyn.
I got to tell you, I'm like a sucker for it. Something about it just... Yes, it's like a horror comedy, but it is very... I like the vampire aspect. It covers a part of vampirism that we're not necessarily very familiar with, which is a lot of like the voodoo stuff that happens. In vampire culture. It's pretty cool. I like that movie a lot. There's a lot of fun stuff. It's fun to see Eddie Murphy be like sort of a... It's fun to see him be the villain of a movie. It's very rare. So, you're gonna like this. I'm not sure anyone else will. Serpent and the Rainbow.
Woo, woo. That's on my top 5, baby.
Yeah, I mean,
that is one of those
I'm not sure why it
movies.
wouldn't be on anyone's.
I saw Serpent and the Rainbow shockingly young. People who follow us know. I had a derelict father who abandoned me when I was very young. But before he ran away, he made sure to fuck me up psychologically with really adult horror movies. And there are a couple scenes from Serpent and the Rainbow that were burned into my mind before I was 7 years old, and I still see them in nightmares today. I think it's a really cool horror movie that's set in a place that we don't do horror in a lot. It has a really unique flavor. I love that movie. I'm with you.
I mean, it has this. It does the same thing that Vampire in Brooklyn does, which is just shows you something you haven't normally seen involving something you're very familiar with. It's cool. Fourth would be Scream, and then the controversial take. My 5th favorite Wes Craven movie is Scream 2, which is a near perfect sequel in my opinion.
It is one of the all-time great horror sequels. So my Wes Craven list is similar. I did not do any of the Scream sequels, although I do think Scream 2 is one of Wes Craven's best movies, right?
Yes.
So I did Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street, because those are the two landmark horror achievements of Wes's career. Both started enormous franchises. That has to be acknowledged. I took I took 2 of his other movies that I feel like don't get enough love, right? People Under the Stairs is one of the wildest, most insane, most hilarious. To me, I always tell people that's the movie I think comes closest to capturing the genius of what Evil Dead did, but without ghosts. Just like really weird, fucked up suburban people, right? I fucking love People Under the Stairs. And also a movie called Shocker, which is a wildly underrated horror film.
Wow.
It is so fucking fun. Man. I love the movie Shocker. It's one of those you forget about it. It pops up. You watch it, and you're just like, fuck, that movie goes hard. Super fucking fun movie.
Damn.
Right? And
that is a deep cut.
Serpent and the Rainbow, right? So we're pretty close. John Carpenter's, I think our list will be a little similar, right? So John Carpenter, to me, has 3 movies that are among not just the best horror movie, but 3 of my favorite movies ever, right? In The Thing, They Live, and Halloween, right? Mm-hmm. I think those movies are far and above the rest of his catalog, which is, again, full of movies I love for both of these guys. This is a hard one. This is like picking when someone's like, which of your kids do you love more? And you're like, I don't want to answer. I probably could, but I don't want to. For number 4, I'm going In the Mouth of Madness. I love that movie. There's a weird flavor and texture to it that I absolutely adore. Sam Neill is my man. I love that dude. And number 5, one of the cornerstone films of my childhood and my whole life, Big Trouble in Little China. I definitely left some movies off that would probably be on most people's list. In that vein, what are your top 5 John Carpenters?
My top 5 are your top 5, with the exception of Mouth of Madness. Instead, I have Escape from New York.
Yeah, Escape from New York, yeah. Assault on Precinct 13 is he has a lot of...
Also a good one. He has a lot of really good ones, but The Thing, Halloween, and They Live, I think, are the bangers that like you have to put in there at the very top without any hesitation.
All right, now here's where we're going to start getting to the hard part, the nitty gritty, right? We have to pick a side. We're going to pick sides, and we're gonna have a friendly exchange of barbs here, right? Here's the first thing I'd like to say. If we're fighting this out, if you had to make your top 5 of the combined list we had, who has more of those movies? So before we do that, are you Team Carpenter or are you Team Craven? Who are you gonna make the case for?
I feel like I needed to be Team Carpenter because you are the horror man.
That's what the ladies call me. Just kidding. My wife does not approve. Anyways, all right. So here's where we'll start. Right, Exhibit A. If you were going to make your top 5, right, of the 10 movies you listed, what would the top 5 cumulatively be, and who has more movies on that list?
I mean, if I was going to make my top 5, I feel like Carpenter has more on this list.
Make the top 5 though. What are the 5?
I mean, for me, the top 5 would be The Thing, They Live, Big Trouble in Little China, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Scream 2.
Scream 2 over Scream? Okay, so here's my top 5 out of these guys, right?
It's a really good sequel.
The Thing, They Live, Halloween, Scream, and Nightmare. Not in that order, right? Those are the 5. Roll them around. Exhibit A for Wes Craven. I would argue that I think John Carpenter might have more of the top 5 movies between the combined filmographies. I think John Carpenter is more top-heavy than Wes Craven. I think perhaps that on an average...
top-heavy exactly?
So I think John Carpenter, and arguably to me, has a couple more movies that would ascend to the top 5 of the 2, right? I think I could make the case that Wes Craven might have the better overall average of film, though, right? So here's my thing, right? So John Carpenter has some amazing films that are smaller, right? But if you look at Wes Craven, right, the fact that, one, John Carpenter didn't do sequels to his own movies for the most part, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that Wes Craven was able to make multiple good Scream movies, right, I think that should count. I think People Under the Stairs, Vampire in Brooklyn, Shocker, Serpent and the Rainbow, I think people look down on these movies and don't consider them on par with things like The Fog, Assault on Precinct 13, and Christine. I think they're better overall in the middle, right? So I think why Carpenter might win the top 5, I think Craven probably wins the top 10. So I think maybe his overall average of film could be a little higher for me.
Sure. I mean, I think that you can make the argument that Wes Craven's had a more sustained career. Like,
well, let me make
John
this case
Carpenter,
too, though, right? So on this same note, I guess this will be a second exhibit, so I may be jumping the gun here. Go ahead. Actually, go ahead and rebut to that. I won't make my second point yet. That's not fair.
While Wes Craven, I think, has the more sustained career, I feel like they're almost neck and neck as far as their legacy. Like, for me, John Carpenter, while he might not have, like, because I see what you're saying, top heavy meaning, because to me, top heavy means he had much more success at the beginning of his career than he has had towards the end.
No, I mean that he probably made a couple movies that are inarguably the best of the bunch.
Sure.
But I think this is what I'm getting at. I think because you're talking about their legacies, that's a good point. I think Wes Craven is unfairly marked as he was the horror movie guy, so he is looked at immediately as lesser, whereas John Carpenter had a little bit more action and some other stuff in his movies that elevated him above just another horror movie guy.
I wouldn't necessarily put it that way. Like, to me, Wes Craven's oeuvre is much more about
oeuvre.
Yes, there's obviously he spends a lot more time. He spends a lot more time in the horror genre with a lot of different things like that. But there's never a time where Wes Craven wasn't able to elevate his art form. Like, to me, that's the sign of what makes Wes Craven Wes Craven, and what's makes.
Don't make Wes Craven's argument. You're Team Carpenter. You got to throw bombs here.
Well,
cheap shots, bottle stabs.
If I'm going to make one, well, I'm not going to argue that way. If I'm going to make one point, I'm going to make the other as well. However, John Carpenter took the movie They Live might be the greatest example of what John Carpenter is capable of with small budget and absolutely no one believing in his product. Same with Big Trouble in Little China.
I would say Big Trouble would be the key of that one.
Big Trouble for me, like They Live is a great example of a guy who's making a movie with a message that is a little beating over the head, but at the same time it's really, really good. Big Trouble in Little China, though, is the proliferation of everything in John Carpenter's career. It's all his powers put into a action buddy comedy set in like Chinatown in San Francisco.
Right.
Like,
so is this your first exhibit? What is the argument you're making?
My first exhibit is Big Trouble in Little China. Because to me, that is the greatest example of a director being able to do something that absolutely no one else could have done with the same amount of finesse. That movie in another director's hands would have been an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
It would have been one of those like Birdemic Manos Hands of Fate.
To be fair,
movies.
Even Kurt Russell was like, "What the fuck, dude?" Like, did not think this was the movie.
Yeah,
right?
And that's why Kurt Russell was proven wrong because, again, we talked about this when we did the pod. Big Trouble in Little China is not about the white man being the hero. It's about the sum of their parts, but more importantly, it's not about the hero. It's about.
But what I'm saying is that he was like, this is not a cool movie. Why do you want to make this? I think to your point is that John Carpenter just saw, and he's like, I can make this cool. What does not seem like it right away, I have the chops. So that's your first argument for John Carpenter.
Yes.
All right, so Exhibit 2 for Wes Craven, why Wes Craven should win this battle.
You mean Exhibit B?
Exhibit B. Think about the monumental amount of horror movies and franchises that are started by Wes Craven, right? So his horror work, right, early on, Last House on the Left was a monumental film, if not a bit reviled, right? That movie's been remade. The Hills Have Eyes was a series. That has been remade and become a remake series, right? The Nightmare on Elm Street movie has spawned an enormous amount of movies and will never die. Eventually, Freddy going on to cross over with Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th. I think most people would argue Freddy Krueger is the greatest horror movie villain of all time, even though a lot of what people like about him came after West, but still. So then you have all of that, right? That happens in the 80s. We come back in the late 90s, and he gives us another franchise horror film which will have a movie releasing next year in 2021 in Scream 5. So the amount of franchise-starting horror movies, right? Horror movies that were so beloved and so popular that they all garnered sequels and eventually have garnered remakes. Scream is kind of, I mean, at this point, Scream 4 was kind of a Scream make, I think they even say in the movie. This is a legacy upon the horror genre that I think is hard to ignore.
Sure. I mean, that is completely true. I think Wes Craven has done an amazing thing with these properties and made them everlasting. John Carpenter only needed one, though, and it's your favorite one of all time. It's Halloween.
I didn't have to come back.
Halloween has only needed to be itself the entire time, good or bad. And there's movies that people hate from this series that some people think are fucking genius. People hate Halloween Resurrection, and I am an ardent fan of it.
But this is so. Halloween is that, John Carpenter's.
Not only that, though. This is an important thing too. Wes Craven's version of like Freddy. Let's go with Nightmare on Elm Street. Like you said, Wes Craven's version of Freddy changed significantly, so much so that they had to reboot it years later to make it more scary, more severe, more intense. Like, we'll call it dark and gritty. I would call that like the Dark Knight effect, essentially.
Yeah.
Halloween, while hijinksy in its H2O resurrection days, has never not been about Michael Myers fucking killing people.
I would take umbrage there, right? Because Nightmare is to Wes Craven what Halloween is to Carpenter. It's that I hit a home run and walk away, right? Wes did come back and righted the ship after the most reviled Nightmare on Elm Street movie with New Nightmare. He brought back, again, his tough, badass Freddy, and most people have New Nightmare ranked very high amongst the series. So, whereas John Carpenter just walked off to play video games and enjoy his old age and millions, Wes is like, I'll come back and save the Dream Demon, the greatest thing ever. And I would also argue that if Wes hadn't created one of the all-time fucking scariest movie monsters, probably the scariest, right? You could not then build that other element of it that would work, right? Robert Englund inarguably has a hand in crafting what made Freddy so good, but none of it works without that fucking brilliant base that Wes Craven provided. And again, all the other fucking franchises that he has created, Carpenter made some good movies that we wanted to see once. And then we're like, that's enough of that world. Enough synth. We're out. Right? Wes Craven, it's like, more. Give me more.
Oh, interesting. Question. Can you hum the Nightmare on Elm Street theme for me, please?
Do, 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 do. Yes, I can. It's the little... I'm really bad at music shit.
Can you?
Yes, I can hear it right now in my fucking head. I just can't.
I'll tell you what, the only thing I hear blaring over it is... Okay. That's what I hear.
Oh, okay, so a musical exhibit is what we're doing. All right, make the case.
Exhibit C, John Carpenter
or B
has explicit control over his narrative by being the person who creates the soundtrack for it, good or bad, because there have been some real clunkers. I'll say that. I was not a fan of the Vampires soundtrack. I will tell you right now. However,
if we're listing things that were not great about Vampire, though, you got to go through a lot of middle-aged white guys before you get to John Carpenter's.
I'll tell you right now, that's not even close to the top 10 worst things about the movie Vampires. However, John Carpenter knows vibe, and he knows what he's doing when it comes to that. So for him to know to set the music, which is a completely different skill set from making the movie, for him to know to set the music, for him to score the movie himself, man, that is control over your storytelling. Beyond control over your storytelling.
And I think you would argue that, so your Exhibit B is the John Carpenter's scores have become so iconic. And I would argue with you, I don't even think there's one I don't like. But I would argue, maybe Wes he didn't need to fucking waste any time keyboarding because he was so busy mastering the visual arts. John Carpenter's like, I got an Achilles heel here, so I have to do some fucking synthesizer trickery. Wes Craven's over here just like the fucking, Zen master. He's just like, yeah, I'll just throw it up on the screen for your eyeballs and let lesser men play. No one has ever been cool playing a keytar.
Lesser men, huh?
What happened when they added guitars and synthesizer to Van Halen?
We just lost all the composers who listened to our pod. Thanks a lot. Lesser men, that's right.
If you're composing on guitars, maybe check yourself in the mirror.
In 1982, what else was there to compose on?
I'm just saying, did John Williams ever compose on a guitar? I don't know. When you hear John Williams scores, do you think of Screech from Saved by the Bell? I don't know. I'm just spitballing.
Sorry, I don't know. I've never seen a John Williams movie. That's my bad.
I'm just saying. The music is inarguably one of the big parts of the repertoire for sure.
Yes.
I would say maybe for Exhibit 3, right? I think
C.
Or C3, whatever. I think this is maybe this is a carry on to my first point, but I don't think Wes Craven has the absolute clunker. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he has the one movie partly from because I like Swamp Thing, right? I don't mind The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, right? So I think, right? And then you have stuff like Red Eye, just like Little Lost Red Eye, even Cursed. I enjoy the movie Cursed.
Listen.
Don't. This is my defense. Objection. Intervening in my. I think if you look at Wes Craven's reel, right? So I'll make a double point since you're obviously going to say that I'm regurgitating point one. One, he doesn't have the 2 or 3 real bad clunkers that Carpenter may have. 2, I think he didn't have the benefit of Kurt Russell in most of his movies. He had to go it with lesser actors and make it happen. I'm just saying, what does The Hills Have Eyes with Kurt Russell? You know what I mean?
Kurt Russell was not an international superstar when John Carpenter cast him. He was the computer who wore tennis shoes.
Sure. He struck.
He was
he's the guy that Disney was like, yeah, we can make franchises out of this guy.
He was but that's the thing. He was a fucking Disney kid. John Carpenter elevated him out of that by making.
What if Red Eye had Kurt Russell
by making him Grady?
Yeah, I mean, look at the different. What if People Under the Stairs had Kurt Russell in the gimp suit? It's not lost to the sands of time, right? What if he's in shock? I think you're trying to make the case that Kurt Russell was made. Maybe one of our greatest movie stars was made by Carpenter. I think maybe he bailed Carpenter out.
I think that your assessment of Wes Craven not having an absolute clunker is incorrect.
Name the clunker? Go ahead, say Cursed.
Cursed is terrible.
Cursed is a fun time capsule of 90s nonsense.
Really? We're doing that one?
Do you honestly think that Cursed is worse than Ghost of Mars?
Cursed has a 17% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes based on 96 reviews.
By the way, I love how you fucking off air, fuck Rotten Tomatoes. And then when it's, perfect for you, you're like, I'm in. Here's the thing. I would say that Cursed is equally as good as Ghost of Mars. It's equally as good as Body Bags. It's equally as good as the Village of the Damned remake. Actually, the Village of the Damned remake is more fun than people remember. I like that one.
By the way, Ghost of Mars has a 22% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Don't fucking Rotten Tomatoes me. I like Cursed better than Ghost of Mars. Here's the thing. Okay, so Ghost of Mars was supposed to have Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken. When it didn't, look what happened. The wheels fell off.
I like Cursed better than Ghost of Mars.
When you give John Carpenter a non-Kurt Russell, the wheels fall off.
I'm saying that both you can like Cursed or Ghosts of Mars, even though you shouldn't like either one. But I can say that demonstrably both of them were bad. So to say that Wes Craven doesn't have a complete clunker in his oeuvre is bullshit. Point rescinded.
I wouldn't call Cursed a complete clunker. It's Christina Ricci and werewolves. Really? Yeah. I'm saying I enjoy that film. It's a fine little jaunt. You know what I like it better than? Starman.
Oof,
I like it better than Dark Star. I'm just saying. I think Wes is pretty bulletproof. I will say I haven't seen the Scream 4 gag reel. Maybe that's not a banger. But from what I
didn't know that Christina Ricci and Jeff Bridges were of the same ilk. That's my bad.
Yeah, I mean, Christina Ricci's an all-timer. Jeff
I had
Bridges
no
is a
idea
hippie.
that Starman and the bobblehead star of Cursed were of the same ilk. That's my fault.
Cursed is a more enjoyable movie that you'll go back to more often. Starman is the worst version of that story. I'm just going to say here. Fine. You know what, John Carpenter? I was soft on you for a whole month. The gloves are off. I'm onto your synthetic bullshit. Your little fucking 8-bit video game scores. You're hiding behind Kurt Russell's beautiful hair and muscles. It's time you get called out, Carpenter.
I truly and honestly think that I think both these guys have at least one major clunker in there.
Also, to be fair, if you have but one clunker in decades of work, that's pretty fucking stellar.
It's pretty good. Again, like both of these guys
have
sustained
you made
careers.
3 points?
I think that John Carpenter's commercial viability declined considerably more than Wes Craven's. I'll say that for sure.
Wes Craven finished. I would argue Wes Craven started faster and finished stronger.
Yes,
that would be my exhibit. I'll make that exhibit 3. Faster start, better finish.
Sure.
Have you made 3 points? So let's see. So let's wrap this up for the jury, right? The people who watch this, comment below. Tell us who won and why, right? So here are to reiterate my case, right? This is my Gregory Peck To Kill a Mockingbird monologue. First off, Wes Craven was the master of starting beloved horror movie franchises, right? Between all the franchises that he started that went on to be wildly popular, him directing multiple entries, them earning remakes, that is a tentacle extension into the genre that's very important, right? I would argue he has a higher base average film than John Carpenter, who is a little top heavy. We all know it. Let's be real. Let's call it. It's because he's carrying a guitar. He's top heavy. And then 3, Wes Craven had the better early career coming out the gates with Glass House on the left and The Hills Have Eyes, 2 fucking visceral films that got guttural reactions, scared the shit out of people where they lived, and has finished stronger in his late career than John Carpenter. That's my case. Those are my 3 points. Thank you for the victory. Alex, if you want to go, that's fine.
John Carpenter would be the better filmmaker because he made Big Trouble in Little China, which was a huge swing and a big win. That alone is definitely the point one.
I love
it's also way
all
outside
his movies. You're like, that's the one.
You know why? Because it's way outside his wheelhouse. It's a fucking action comedy. He doesn't make those. He never made those. This was his like big fucking swing, man, and it was really good. It should not have worked, and in any other director's hands, including Wes Craven's, it probably would have been a massive failure. Number 2, legacy. John Carpenter's ability to sustain with a single movie, whereas Wes Craven had to reinvent his original thing and then have to do another one just to stay relevant.
That's so fucking disrespectful. That's so disrespectful.
And finally, John Carpenter knew his movies so well, he knew how to set the tone properly by creating their iconic soundtracks. And that also puts him out a little out front in Wes Craven.
Guitar. He is kind of like the Sammy Hagar of film composers.
I didn't say he was a film composer. He's a
rocker.
filmmaker who also scored his movies. By the way, there's other directors who do that, but not nearly as good as John Carpenter.
Has anyone ever compared John Carpenter to the Sammy
Both of them
Hagar
have had clunkers. So don't say that he's the only one who hasn't had a total shitstorm in his career.
I think Wes Craven's average film is better, right? If you conglomerated all these movies, Wes's average is a little higher and he has less clunkers. I think that matters.
Wes Craven also made more movies than John Carpenter. Now,
to wrap this up and get out of here, we're running a little long. If you had to make a case for the other guy, I think you missed, right? I would have thrown out your Big Trouble Little China argument. I think it's an interesting case, but not very strong. I would have gone with Halloween, right? John Carpenter, when he made Halloween, right? Because you could argue Psycho and Peeping Tom came first and gave us kind of like the slasher or whatever. John Carpenter is responsible for about 1,000 movies that came after it with Halloween, right? Michael Myers is directly responsible for Friday the 13th and Jason Voorhees. So what he achieved in that movie changed the horror game in such an enormous way that to me is probably like that's where you get to the John Carpenter. His best movies are just a little bit higher than Wes's. Halloween changed everything.
That's exactly what I meant when I said legacy. I mean, it's like you're making my point for me. Thank you.
Well, no,
Great.
I said.
All right, John Carpenter win. I love it.
Change
I love it.
one of
Thank
my
you.
arguments and make an argument for Wes Craven. So we can be gentlemen about this and not they live fighting in a dirty parking lot alley, hitting each other with trash. Be a fucking gentleman. Make a case for Wes Craven. Which of my arguments did you not like, and what would be your replacement?
I mean, honestly, I would have probably made all the same points that you made about Wes Craven. I probably would have added that Wes Craven had a much better understanding of talent. Like, to me, great directors surround themselves with great artists, and Wes Craven understanding that Kevin Williamson had something very special with Scream means not only is he self-referential, but also he understood how important it was to look back and take a look at his own work and say, oh, there's room not just for parody, but also honoring this entirely. So to me, Wes Craven's ability to sample talent and to choose people to work with is very important. It's why Sidney Prescott is the second best final girl of all time. Only to Laurie Strode, John Carpenter's
if not girl. The best, because she didn't have to. You know what they didn't do in Scream 2? Like, oh, let's drug Sid the whole movie so she can crawl around in a gown and not fight while fat security guards getting murdered. I don't know. I mean, Sid was noticeably not there much in Scream 3, but it's Hollywood. Everyone has parties to go to and shit. She was out living on the ranch. I would say both of these men are just the fucking best. And they're both great writers. Yeah. They're both great directors. They both gave us so many things that became so important to our lives. Wes Craven doing it without Kurt Russell, extra impressive. Without the guitar, extra impressive. And he's still doing it. Extra impressive. I don't know. I mean, you guys can comment and just type my name or Wes's name down there, as the winner. Give us your top five from those two.
Or you don't have to. You don't have to do that either, by the way.
I mean, you don't have to. We don't want to hurt Alex and John, the Sammy Hagar of filmmaking's feelings. So leave your top five from both directors. Leave us your top five from them cumulatively. Who do you think wins? What's your number one reason? So share this on your social medias. Leave your comments below. Join the debate. Leave us ideas for other filmography face-offs you'd like to see. We're going to start doing these pretty frequently. So we have a list, but we'll add yours to it. You can get at us on social media. You can email us, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. In the description, you can find a link for the audio version of our film podcast where we discuss movies, the Film Alchemist podcast. So go there, rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. As always, thank you very much for having a gentleman's fight with us. I don't know. It was hard. That was a hard one. That was one of the harder ones we've come up with.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna go watch Cursed.
Yeah, I'm gonna go watch Cursed and just euphoria. It's gonna be the exact same experience as transforming into a werewolf, but just so much more orgasmic. Cursed.